Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the council meeting for Wednesday, June the 14th. First item on the agenda is call to order, and the next item is our land acknowledgement. So we are gathering on lands that have been home to First Nations people from time immemorial. We acknowledge that what we now call Richmond Hill are on the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Mississaugas and Chippewa nations of the Williams Treaty. We also recognize that we are on part of the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat. We would also like to acknowledge all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people from across North America, also known as Turtle Island, now who reside in the city of Richmond Hill. We are committed to rebuilding constructive and cooperative relationships. So at this point, I would ask everybody to stand, if you can, for the national anthem. Okay, thank you very much. We have a public forum now, and we have one delegate who is registered. I think this delegate is going to be speaking to us virtually. Julia Vasilev from 99 Merton Street regarding repurposing a soccer field in her neighborhood. So Julia, I see you on the screen there, and I think you're unmuted. So you've got 5 minutes to address council. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, Julia Vasiliev. I was just wondering, so we have a very affluent growing neighborhood here, and we currently have a soccer field that's not being used for anything. There are no sports teams that happen. There's no one really uses it whatsoever. And I was just wondering what the process would be like, and if it is at all possible to change the soccer field into something a bit more safe, so that way there aren't any balls flying. That way it's just, there could be a bit more participation within our community. And also for like maybe whether it's tennis courts or basketball courts or something else. There's a lot of kids in the neighborhood who do play basketball, and they play in the streets, and then there's a lot of cars that have to stop, balls go flying. So I just, for the safety of everybody and just to make it a bit more of a exciting community, just wondering, is it possible? And if so, how does it work?
Okay, Julia, the public forum is really an opportunity for members of the public like yourself to be talking and bringing issues to us, which you've done. Mm-hmm. It's not really a time where we would have a back and forth, but what I would recommend is if you wanted to speak to your ward councillor, who's Carol Davidson, okay, and she can give you more information on that. And I certainly would be happy to talk to you as well if you wanted to reach out to me directly. But what I would thank you for is bringing this to our attention. We do have a parks plan that kind of generally outlines what the future of parks are going to be in Richmond Hill, but we can certainly sit down offline and have a conversation about that. But I appreciate you bringing this forward at this time. And okay, I certainly would commit to having that conversation with you in more detail later.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, and thank you very much. And thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it.
No problem. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is council announcements. Anybody have council announcements? I see Councillor Silovitz and then Councillor Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Just a couple of things. I just want to thank all residents who came out to our Ward 5 Civic Engagement Committee meeting last night, held at the library, where we discussed bylaws, how important they are and why we have them. And once again, thanks to Don and Carmela and to our commissioner who had worked hard in order to bring a presentation to the residents. It was very well received and was a wonderful discussion and a Q&A. And my thanks to Councillor Thompson, who came as well. It was a pleasure to have him join us. And my thanks go to Chair Pat Pollock, who's with us here in Chambers, for all the work that she does on the Ward 5 Civic Engagement Committee. Thank you, Pat. My other thing is, please don't forget that on Saturday, June the 17th, at 3 p.m. is the Pride Parade, the York Pride Parade in Newmarket. The parade goes south down Main Street, and then it stops at Riverwalk Commons, where there is a big community gathering for the entire day and the entire night. And there's actually on Friday night they have some musicians there as well and productions. So love to see everybody there. We'll be marching with a beautiful fire truck, and so come and cheer Richmond Hill, show your Richmond Hill pride, and show your York Region pride. We'd love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shu.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Just a friendly reminder that my traffic safety seminar will be held tonight, and it will see active participation from the YLP, who will send a dedicated officer focusing on the enforcement of the traffic regulations related to illegal driving behaviors. And we're also thrilled to have another guest speaker, a seasoned traffic safety engineer, who will share insights and engage in a comparison and discussion of the benefits and drawbacks associated with various traffic calming measures like speed bumps, radar cameras, stop sign, and more. So I would like to invite you all to join us at 7:30 tonight on the first floor on this building, EBC building at 225 East Pickecourt Road, Richmond Hill. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind residents once again that on this coming Saturday, June 17th, we're going to be having a free community event at Lake Wilcox. A reminder once again that parking is limited there, and every Richmond resident is entitled to register one vehicle to park for free at Lake Wilcox for the entire season. So it'd be very helpful if you do so prior to this event, so that you can park in one of the lots there. We're looking forward to a fabulous day at an incredible venue, and everyone in Richmond Hill is welcome to attend.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. And looking forward to attending that. And next is Councillor Tree.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chair. Through Ms. Chair to our audience, last Saturday we hosted in the Ward 4 in Argonne West Community Center as a multicultural gala. So I would say is around 400 people joined this event. So thank you so much for council member support. Also MPP and MP joined this one. Also a lot of community residents show up as well. So thank you so much for support. The second one will be this Saturday, June 17th, in 9 a.m. in the morning in Richmond Green Park. We're going to have the Mongsan Charity Fund walking street as well. So I welcome everyone join this event for walking to support our Mongsan Senior House. The next one will be next week on Friday, which is June 23. We're going to have a RENA award ceremonies hosted on the one city, and this is going to be a lot of ceremonies where people from RENA communities and also from the community who contribute a lot. And this is going to be the awarding ceremony. If everyone has time, please join that event as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just want to thank everybody who attended my safety symposium on this past Thursday evening out at Elgin Barrow Arena. It was very well attended. I believe we had over 60 participants in total. I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor Godwin Chan for coming out. Also like to thank the Mayor, David West, for coming out and actually staying through the whole evening. I believe that, you know, we all learned a few things that night, and in some occasions in a bit of a humorous way. But other than that, I just wanted to say it was well attended, and I really enjoyed that everybody participated. So thank you for coming out.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Anybody else? Just a couple of things on my part. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for that. I actually refined my Heimlich maneuver skills at your event, which is great. And Councillor Tree, I'm sorry I wasn't able to be out to your event, but it sounded like a really great event by all that I've spoken to. So thank you so much for doing all that. We've had some really good council events in the last little while, and I thank all of my my colleagues for putting forth the effort to do that. It's a nice contribution to the community. I just wanted to also reiterate, we had a great pride flag raising here at the City Hall the other day, and so that the pride flag is now proudly flying at 225 East Beaver Creek, and I am looking forward to participating in the Pride Parade in Newmarket. It's always a lot of fun. I was there last year for the first time, and I mean, it's a very festive and fun family atmosphere. So if you're in the Newmarket area or looking for something to do on that day, please don't hesitate to come by and cheer everybody on. Okay, so that being it for council announcements, I will move on to introduction of emergency or time-sensitive matters. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk. Okay, now I'm looking for a motion for adoption of the agenda. Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Shu, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that carries unanimously. Disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Anybody there? No. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Clerk. So I'm looking now for a motion to adopt the previous council minutes. We have council public meeting on May 16th, the council meeting on May 24th, and the council public meeting on June 6th. So we could do a 3-for-1 special on that. Councillor Davidson, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Okay, so moving on to identification of items requiring separate discussion on today's agenda. We have no delegations, so everything could potentially pass on consent, but is there anything that we would like to pull to talk about? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would appreciate if we could have a further discussion on the election sign bylaw amendment. I believe that's 15.2.6 and associated bylaw 18.6.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. 15.2.1, which is 0 Oneida Crescent. Okay. Okay. All right. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, so we've got, just so everybody knows that's watching, we've got passed on consent is 15.1, 15.2, 15.2.2, 15.2.3, 15.2.4, 15.2.5, 15.2.7, 15.2.8, 15.2.9, 15.2.10, 15.2.11, 15.2.12, 15.13, the correspondence 15.14, and we'll wait for the bylaws? Okay, we'll hold all the bylaws for now. Okay, so we have all of those. I need adoption of the remainder of the items then. Councillor Shu, Councillor Liu, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. All right, no public hearings today. So we now have the pleasure of a presentation by Stephen Collins and Company, which I'll let you introduce your staff, Stephen, from Metrolinx. And this is a very important update on a very important issue in Richmond Hill, which is the update on the Yonge North Subway extension. And so, Stephen, thank you very much for being here. We certainly are very interested in hearing as much about this as we possibly can. So you've got the floor and take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, Your Worship and members of Richmond Hill Council. As said, my name is Stephen Collins, and I have the privilege of being the program sponsor for the Yonge North Subway extension down at Metrolinx. I'm joined this morning by Chris Spencer, who is our Vice President of Project Delivery. He's responsible for the delivery side of the project. Also joining me is Rajesh Ketterpal. He's our Vice President of Community Engagement and Communications, and he'll have a few slides at the end of my part of the presentation to talk about our community engagement activities. And Renee Afum-Botang, who is our manager of the Transit Corridor Land Designation and the Building Transit Faster Act piece, which is a portion of the presentation today that I'm going to be getting into. And we have Renee here today just in the event there are some questions of detail that you want to get into. So it does give me a great privilege and pride to be here this morning. I take this obligation to keep elected council such as yourself well informed on the progress that we're making on the Yonge North Subway extension. And I do have a series of slides that I'm going to go through, but obviously there'll be lots of time for questions afterwards. Next slide, please. We are moving this project forward at pace, and at pace, what we mean by that is very quickly. With recent achievement of very significant milestones that demonstrate the very visible ways, the great progress we are making on this project. And if you do travel up and down the Yonge Street corridor, down in the south end of sort of Markham and Vaughan, and down into the city of Toronto, you can see our backhoes on site, and we are in the process of relocating utilities. And through this presentation, I'll also highlight the recent milestones that we are achieving, namely with our advanced tunnel contract release and the celebration of that getting out to market. Next slide, please. And next slide. A few orientation slides just at the beginning. This council is well aware of the compelling need for the subway extension. It has been in the planning for decades and well established in municipal, regional, and provincial policy. The subway extension will complete what we call the missing link in the rapid transit network between the BRT services on Highway 7 and Yonge Street and the Richmond Hill Centre and the Finch Line 1 subway in the city of Toronto. The benefits of the project indicate a very strong transit project. Just going down the list of them quickly, we'll attract more than 94,000 daily riders. And what is key in our economic benefits of the project is that those riders will save up to 22 minutes each way on their trips to and from their destinations. And what that 22 minutes means for a person is 22 minutes back in their day that they can do things more enjoyable than spending it in their travels and their daily commute. The subway will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, bring 26,000 more people to within a short walk of rapid transit, and help manage congestion, removing 7,700 kilometers of traveled morning rush hour traffic. A couple of points just to clarify here. The metrics on the slide are from our initial business case, which modeling was done back in the 2020 timeframe, and it predates the establishment of the provincial TOCs in that area. So we are expecting the ridership, the travel time savings, and the people who are within a close walk of rapid transit service to increase significantly. And that'll be updated in our preliminary design business case, which will be done the middle part of next year. Next slide, please. What we're super proud about as part of the project that Metrolinx is advancing is our bridge station, which is a key element in our rapid transit network and is super important to us for maximizing the network effect that give people convenient connections between services to provide an excellent customer experience and maximize opportunities to shift auto users to transit customers. And just to orient you on the slide that you see, Bridge Station is represented by the rectangle centrally located in the middle of the Langstaff Gateway Richmond Hill Centre Urban Growth Centre. And it is the connection point of not only the subway with the GO Rail service, but also the GO Bus service that uses the 407 right now. and the existing Viva Young and Viva Highway 7 rapid transit services. We are also protecting for the future connection of the 407 Transitway right into this major transit hub. As ancillary benefits, by using the existing rail corridor, as we are doing, we are bringing the subway up the CN rail corridor and running it parallel to the CN corridor. We have removed approximately 130 buses per hour from traveling along the municipal roads into the downtown area of the future Richmond Hill Centre. If you think about the plan previously was to have the major transit hub located directly within the planned building area of the Richmond Hill Centre. And all of those buses from Viva and from YRT would need to travel into that bus terminal, which would be part of that Richmond Hill Centre. We've removed it from the Richmond Hill Centre, placed it in between those two highways at the convergence point of those rapid transit services. And as a direct benefit, we're removing those bus trips from the Richmond Hill Centre local roads. Next slide, please. YNSE is a mega project. It's a mega infrastructure project that will require services of many public and private sector partners to deliver. We continue to learn from lessons on our past projects, feedback from our partners, and engagement with the supply chains and the markets that we deal with. We have determined the optimal way to deliver YNSE, and what we describe this as the optimal way being the contract packaging strategy. Is through 4 main contracts. We've listed them on the screen there, but the first one is some early works down at Finch Station. The second being our advanced tunnel contract. The third is a stations, rails, and systems contract. And the last one being the ancillary work that's done by third parties, mainly utility companies that will be out there relocating their services in support of the project. The reason why I'm identifying our contract packaging strategy here is I'm going to get into some updates on where we are with the Finch early works and with the advanced tunnel contract. Next slide, please. Next slide. So a complex component of the Yonge North Subway Extension design and construction is that connection at Finch. This includes not only the tunnel and track connection, which is actually the easiest part of it, the civil work to build the tunnels and the box for the extension and connecting them to the existing Finch station and tail track area is relatively straightforward. What is quite complex is the need to connect the rails, the power systems, the communication systems, and the train control systems. If you think about the intimate connection that needs to happen between our extension and all of that infrastructure and control that the TTC has on their current system, it's very, very complicated. So we have established the Finch Early Works project to essentially what we term de-risk or take a lot of the complexity out of those big follow-on contracts. We want to do it in a very detailed way upfront so that we're not encountering delays as part of those future projects with the intimate connections at Finch. And right now we have the time to do that. We have established, as I said, the Finch Early Works contract to get some of this complex work out of the way. And quite frankly, I'm super pleased to report that work is underway. If you go down there today, you can see the construction activity taking place for the Yonge Subway Extension. And that work is scheduled to be complete by the end of this year. Next slide, please. We have achieved a major project milestone. At the end of April of this year, we released what we refer to as the Advanced Tunnel Contract Request for Qualifications. This was announced and celebrated by our minister. The RFQ, or the Request for Qualifications, is the first step in our process to bring a contractor on board to complete the design and construction of the tunnels. We had scheduled to complete the RFQ phase this summer to be followed by the RFP phase, or the Request for Proposal phase. We have a 2-phase procurement process, qualifications, then a detailed proposal. And we anticipate completing the procurement of the tunnel contract in late 2024 and then immediately begin construction thereafter. We appreciate the Advanced Tunnel RFQ was scheduled to be released earlier than this anticipated date. And this is for good reason. Metrolinx has a rigorous and deliberate approach to project delivery, including timing for engaging the market on our procurements. This includes full readiness assessments of both our readiness to proceed and our understanding of the market's readiness to participate. If you think about the supply chains that we're dealing with on these big projects, they need to be in a state of readiness and willingness to proceed in order to express interest in our projects. The timing of the RFQ has allowed us to significantly reduce interface risks between the Yonge North project and the adjacent lands, including the Finch Early Works, as I mentioned, and our utility relocations. And I'm pleased to report that we've already started to engage the market through the RFQ process. We've had proponent meetings, we've had an applicants meeting. 29 companies have expressed significant interest in participating, and we're working with them through the RFQ process. And it's not only the tunneling market that's highly engaged. We have found this announcement, the announcement of the request for qualifications being released, has increased the participation from the public and stakeholders in our sort of media channels and in our public engagements. Case in point, we did host a virtual open house earlier in, well, I should say in May. And as part of that open house, we had the highest attendance that we had had of any of our open houses. And that was sort of directly related to this project moving forward in a very meaningful way. Next slide, please. Just a few scope items for the advanced tunnel contract. Essentially what we're going to be doing is building the tunnels from the Langstaff Gateway area, going southerly down towards Finch Station. In the scope are essentially building the tunnels. We'll have some ancillary work that needs to be done to facilitate the future construction of the stations. We'll be relocating utilities. We'll be acquiring the necessary lands that need to be acquired for the tunnel contract, all the while sort of communicating and clearly engaging with the communities along the corridor. Next slide, please. Completing utility relocations as an early work is yet another approach we're taking to de-risk the major contracts being the tunnel contract and the stations, rails, and systems contract. The first 7 utility projects are currently underway on the street. And as I mentioned, if you go down there, you can actually see the physical work taking place to get the Yonge subway extension built. We're also working closely with your staff on the needs for relocation and protection of Richmond Hills services in the areas that we're going to be working. And I really want to thank your staff so far for their excellent engagement in the project and working proactively with Metrolinx. We know that our construction in the field is going to have some impacts on residents and businesses in the area. We do our best to mitigate these, and we do our best to communicate ahead of time with these stakeholders about the upcoming work and how they might be able to sort of travel and sort of be around the work that we're doing. We do ask that if any questions come into the city or to any of yourselves, your council offices, kindly just forward them on to the Metrolinx team, and we're all too happy to engage with the residents and personally address their concerns. Next slide, please. Another milestone that we achieved over the springtime is the dedication of the transit corridor lands for the Yonge North Subway extension. As you may know, the provincial government established a piece of legislation referred to as the Building Transit Faster Act. And this was done to accelerate and remove typical challenges and barriers experienced when delivering these transit projects. Under BTFA, Building Transit Faster Act, an area around the entire alignment has been established as transit corridor lands, in which the authorities of the Building Transit Faster Act are available to Metrolinx. Next slide, please. In simple terms, the transit corridor lands represent the area in which authorities of the Building Transit Faster Act are available. And it should be noted, these authorities are but one tool in our toolbox. We use all of our normal course of business activities to try and secure the properties we need and to get access to the properties that we need, relocate utilities, and do all of the other sort of project-related activities that need to be done. And we'll continue doing these normal course of business processes and procedures with the notion that the Building Transit Faster Act authorities will be there if we must use them in order to protect the project schedule. Metrolinx has defined an area around the subway route in which these authorities are applicable, and coordination with landowners, including municipalities, may be necessary. A further buffer on top of what is described and shown in sort of the yellow or the beige color there is added. And this buffer is added because sort of the moment in time we're at now on our project is about 5 to 10% design. refinements will happen over the course of the entire delivery cycle of the project. We wanted to have a buffer area in the event that sort of our project area does shift over time. And YNC, the Yonge North Subway Extension, is not alone in the designation of the transit corridor lands. The Ontario Line, the Scarborough Subway Extension, and the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension are all Metrolinx-led projects where this designation has been in place for well over a year. And while we have sent out notices to approximately 1,100 property owners on the corridor, there are over 100,000 properties within the GTA that fall within transit corridor land designation. And so our owners along the Yonge North corridor are not alone in sort of what this means to them as sort of their neighbors and sort of fellow property owners adjacent to these transit corridors within the GTA are also finding themselves within a transit corridor land designation. Next slide. A few details on what this actually means to a property owner. And really, in a nutshell, what it means is if they have an activity that they want to do on their property, the Building Transit Fast Track Act requires them to secure a corridor development permit from Metrolinx. And that's just a mechanism in which their activity, meaning like a development or a building type project on their property, would need to be coordinated with Metrolinx. This is not intended for any other purpose than to ensure that these private projects are coordinated with the subway project. Typical examples of private projects are noted on the screen there, such as rebuilding a home, an extension, or an addition of a major amenity on their property. We're not getting into sort of if somebody wants to plant a tree and dig a hole for planting a tree. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sort of these major activities that somebody would want to do on their property that would sort of require through the corridor development permit some coordination with Metrolinx. Just a few metrics. To date, we on those other projects have received more than 600 corridor development permit applications, and I'm pleased to report that they've all been approved. There haven't been any that have not been approved. And quite frankly, this demonstrates that sort of the permitting process is working exactly as identified and that we're not wanting to get in the way of anyone doing their project. All we're merely doing is wanting to ensure that the subway projects, in this case, Yonge North, are coordinated with those private projects. Next slide, please. One item within the Building Transit Fast Track I just want to bring your attention to is the ability for Metrolinx to access private property within the transit corridor land and buffer area. We may need to access private property for a variety of reasons, including what we call preview inspections, so survey, tree inspections, non-destructive types of work. We'll, of course, through our normal course of business activities, try and get an owner's permission to enter to do these activities. But in the event we are not able to get that access within the timeframes that our delivery schedule requires, then the Building Transit Fast Track Act does permit Metrolinx with adequate notice access a person's private property for the purpose of those preview inspections. And to ensure clarity, I just want to make sure, because I'm going to get sort of into a property slide coming up, being in a transit corridor land designated area does not mean that Metrolinx needs to acquire your property for the purposes of the project. The transit corridor lands area is specifically to coordinate work within private works within the transit corridor land area and the subway project. Property acquisition and the identification of property requirements is completely separate. Next slide, please. Just a couple of points on our notification. So as I mentioned, towards the end of April, the transit corridor land designation was approved. And we immediately began notifying residents and businesses or property owners about this. We have sort of fielded lots of inquiries. We do have a number of resources available on the Metrolinx website to offer questions or offer answers to questions. And of course, if folks still have questions that are not resolved through their work and investigations on the site, our team is always available to help answer those. And again, the Yonge North project is not alone in this. We have the designation on the other projects as well. Next slide. And next slide. I wanted to do a full stop here just to get into the property acquisition and negotiation process. It is unrelated to the transit corridor land designation. We have separate work streams that are identifying the properties that Metrolinx is going to require both on a temporary basis and a permanent basis for the project. We have begun this process and we are working with owners throughout the corridor, with the main focus being on the section that is the advanced tunnel contract, essentially from the Langstaff Gateway area moving southerly. Like at the City of Richmond Hill, we do have defined processes that we follow for acquiring our property. And we do sort of always approach these with an approach of compassion and sensitivity, because the identification of somebody's property being needed for a big project like this can be quite upsetting. And we want to make sure that we are treating them compassionately and with the empathy that's needed. And we always start our process trying to achieve what we call a willing buyer, willing seller, or an amicable arrangement to acquire the lands. But in those situations where the negotiations have stalled or we need to advance them to protect our project schedule, we do at times resort to the tool of expropriation to be that extreme remedy for stalled property acquisitions. Next slide, please. And just next slide. I've already talked about some of the progress that we've been making. Most of the slide talks about that. I just do want to highlight a couple of quick points on where we're going. In the coming months, we are focused on the tunnel procurement. We are going to be closing and receiving those requests for qualifications later this summer, with the scheduled release of that next stage of the procurement, the request for proposal, to be issued before the end of this year. What that will do is get us out to the market with the invited firms to submit proposals. And that is part of a defined sort of structured process to get to a contract award at the end of 2024. We are also planning to open our community office. It is on High Tech Road, sort of a little east of our High Tech Station area. And while much of the outward focus during the last year has been on the progress of our tunnel contract and getting sort of those works in the field started, we have also used the time to deeply engage with the municipal engineering, planning, and operations staff on our stations planning work. There's a mountain of work taking place primarily at Bridge and High Tech Station to advance the planning of those stations. And what I would like to say is we've had great success in using the time that we've had. We have sort of more deeply engaged with municipal staff than we would have otherwise if we didn't have the time on the project because of our contract structure approach. And I do just want to have a special shout out to Daniel Olding and Nima Nagavi. They are the leads from the City of Richmond Hill that are engaging with Metrolinx. And while I know there's a deep team at Richmond Hill that's supporting them and doing the heavy lifting, Nima and Daniel have been great advocates and support for me and the Metrolinx team in advancing the project. Mr. Mayor, with that, I would like to turn it over to Raj to give you a few slides and insight into our community engagement and communications plan.
Thanks, Stephen. Next slide, please. Good morning, Your Worship and members of Council. Great to be back here again to share some highlights from our communications and community engagement efforts on the YNSE project. Since the release of the initial business case back in March 2021, our teams have been very active. The work has not stopped out in the community. We have a dedicated YNSE community engagement team. They've been conducting door-to-door canvasses with residents and businesses along the corridor. They've been at community pop-ups, delivering construction notices, responding to questions, coordinating community walks, and establishing what we call construction liaison committees where we have active work ensuing. We have maintained a steady flow of information, providing project updates through various channels, including our newsletters, through social media, direct mail, and of course, council presentations and elected official briefings. And we have been invited by some of our council members to attend community fairs. And we have some upcoming town halls also with some of the council members in this month. We've held 17 virtual open houses, and Stephen mentioned our latest one on May 17th. We had over 350 participants. We, along with our project teams, have continued to work with our municipal partners and transit agencies to coordinate efforts, and we'll continue to do so. Next slide, please. As we deliver on our purpose to improve lives through transit, our community engagement team is focusing on helping communities navigate through the disruption caused through construction. We are very mindful and heavily invested in being a good neighbor, and this is actively being extended to our project companies and contractors. We hold our project companies accountable through detailed requirements, for example, on noise and vibration in our project agreements. We're committed to our engagement efforts to seek input, feedback on our projects, and responding to any questions and concerns with residents and businesses. Next slide, please. There are many ways to connect with us, and I'm pleased to share that we're working towards, as Stephen mentioned, our YNSC community office later this year. It will be located in Richmond Hill, and we look forward to welcoming you into our community office. Location is being actively renovated, and it will feature a sound lab. We've talked about that in previous council presentations, and it's being specifically designed for the YNSC project. With that, the bell is summoning me to close up on my presentation. I will hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. Stephen, do you want to just close out, or have you got anything else you'd like to say? Or
the only thing I have to say is thank you very much to you and Richmond Hill Council for making the time available for Metrolinx to come and present this. It's super important for us to make sure that you're well informed on the progress that we're making and answer your questions, and we're here to do just that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. But also I want to thank you, as I said at the beginning, for being here. This is a very important project that's going to have significant positive benefits for our community, but we really need that coordination to get all the details. And it's unbelievable how many details there are. I'm learning more and more and more about that as we go on, but it is quite amazing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to council. I noticed that Regional Local Councillor has his little virtual hand up there. So if you want to get us started, Councillor Chan. You're on mute. Councillor Chan, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Councillor Chan. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay, good. Thank you very much to Mr. Chair, to Stephen, everybody at Metrolinx. Even though I believe this may be the third time I listened to the presentation, but I still maintain excited and interested. Thank you. And also I appreciate that your presentation and particularly your recognition of City of Richmond Hill staff under Dan Holding and a number of other people. So we are working towards a timeline. And I think it's good to hear that the RFP for the tunneling might be not the RFQ now, but maybe ending by end next year. Now, you did say about construction soon after. For myself and my colleagues and members of the public, would that soon after, are we talking about shooting for the first quarter of 2025? Through you, Mr. Chair, just try to get a better sense of the timing.
Stephen?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So there's two parts to it. So yes, the construction will, for the intensive part, get underway in the first quarter of 2025 on the advanced tunnel contract. One of the strategies that we're looking at to accelerate the delivery of the overall project is the ability to award what we refer to as an early works agreement or a early construction agreement with the firm that we are ultimately going to award a contract with, which could get some early construction activity on the tunnel contract underway in the later part of 2024. But that's a strategy that we're currently pursuing and looking at the benefits that would come with that in terms of overall schedule acceleration. But the material work will begin in the early part of 2025. And just to help manage expectations, so once we award the tunnel contract, that will be the launch point for the firm that we are under contract with to begin sort of manufacture and delivery of the tunnel boring machine. And while that manufacture and delivery of the tunnel boring machines is happening, they will be building the work compound that will be the launch shaft area. The launch shaft area is quite a complex sort of, I'll call it an industrial operation. If you think about it, the tunnels will be dropped down into a shaft area. and that shaft area needs to be built. All of the supporting sort of facilities need to be provided. And the last thing that happens before the tunnel boring machine is actually launched is it's delivered to site and dropped in that launch shaft. And sort of that shaft area will start to get under construction in early 2025.
Thank you for that. And through Mr. Chair, you mentioned about that, yeah, they obviously have to prepare, get the site ready. Could you help to also share with us in the city of Richmond Hill? If I understand it correctly, the tunneling work actually would not be existing or doing anything within the city of Richmond Hill boundary. So if it helped myself and others to better understand, where would about the work will be done for tunneling in terms of where it begins, where it ends on the particular Yonge North subway line? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, happy to. So our project is divided into an underground section and an at-grade section. The transition from underground to at-grade happens in the Langstaff Gateway area. And the tunnel is obviously an underground component of the subway. And so the tunnel will be built from the Langstaff Gateway area, so just south of Highway 407, adjacent to the CN corridor. The tunnel will be built from that location, working in a southerly direction. So that launch shaft compound will be located in the Langstaff Gateway. The work within the city of Richmond Hill will, for the most part, be part of our stations, rails, and systems contract. And that'll be sort of going to procurement during the delivery of the advanced tunnel contract. And so the work within the city on the stations and the rails and the systems will be taking place later in the overall project delivery. That's not to say that there won't be any activity happening in Richmond Hill. We are currently working to understand what utilities need to be relocated in the city. And there are some works to sort of get those utilities relocated and out of the way prior to that stations, rails, and systems contract coming through.
Thank you for that clarification. So the tunneling work basically is happening south of Highway 407, so which is outside the boundary of the city of Richmond Hill. Got it. So insofar as people in Richmond Hill, would anything like in terms of traffic detour, notwithstanding the tunneling is not actually happening within our physical boundary, but as you said, Stephen, there will be other things like utilities relocation, things of that nature. So I'm picturing if I live in the Red Maple high-tech area, would residents or businesses in Richmond anticipating certain kind of traffic rearrangement, things of that nature? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We're still working through the details of what physical construction projects we would want to take on within the city of Richmond Hill boundaries as sort of early works or advanced works. We don't have those identified yet, so I can't give you specifics on sort of where and when. There may be sort of implications to the Richmond Hill services, mainly the road network. But as soon as we do have those details, we'll be sharing them with your staff and making sure that the communities are well informed.
Okay, thank you. My last question is for Mr. Chair. You mentioned that a community office would be constructed or would be put in a high-tech area, so a high-tech rural area. So would the timing be relatively close to where those utility work around supporting tunneling be done, or still in the early stage at this point in time? Through Mr. Chair, just try to get a sense of timing and the whereabout to the extent that this complex and complicated project are already designated whereabout the committee office will be located.
Yeah, so I'll turn it over to Raj, but firstly, the advanced utility relocations and any utility work we need to do early in the city of Richmond Hill is completely separate from the community office. The community office is on a much shorter timeline, and I'll just turn it over to Raj to give some sort of further details on that.
Thanks, Stephen, and thank you, Councillor, for that question. So as I mentioned, the location of the community office is at 295 High Tech Road, which is in between Yonge and Bayview. currently under construction, and we anticipate the community office being open by the end of this year. We'll have scheduled office hours for community residents to come in to ask any questions. The team will be available there. We'll also host meetings there. And we'll also feature a sound lab, which we'll have opened at the same time. We will be extending, invitations to come in and visit the facility before kind of opening, with our grand opening. So expect an invitation to come. But very much, we'll want to have a presence along the corridor, and we're fortunate enough to find a suitable location which could house a sound lab, and also give us enough space to have our team there. So our team will be there, working out of there, and we'll have office hours available for drop-in and any questions.
On that note, thank you very much, Stephen and Raj. And I'll be remiss if I'm not saying that Raj and your team has been certainly very supportive, and particularly the Spring Fair I held back in May and other council members' events. And looking forward actually to having the community office in Richmond Hill, even before any tunneling work may be visible on the south side of Richmond Hill. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to seek that clarification. In particular, what are the potential impact things that people in Richmond Hill will see or not see? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hsu.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, and it's quite comprehensive, and thanks for your update. I really appreciate that. I have two questions. The first question is, when is the scheduled completion date? Is it the 2031, 32? I remember.
So right now we're looking at the early 2030s is sort of what we're communicating as far as the completion and sort of opening of the subway. As you can appreciate, when we bring on our project companies, they are sort of accountable for finishing the design and the delivery side. And so we need to match up what our forecasted schedule is with what their delivery plan is. And we're not going to know on the tunnel side, sort of at the end of next year when our project company confirms their schedule. And on the stations, rails, and systems side, we'll know that as we go through the procurement process.
So are there any specific strategies to make sure that, to ensure timely completion without any significant delays?
So that's a great question. Not that not all questions are great, but that is a particularly good one. And so what Metrolinx believes is we're a learning organization. And so we've learned a lot of lessons from our past projects. I'm not going to name any projects, but one of the strategies that we are employing on our projects today is to separate these big projects into component pieces. And I spent some time talking about the Finch Early Works, the advanced tunnel contract, the station rails and systems contract. Separating these massive projects into component pieces is one of the strategies that increases the probability of finishing them on the scheduled completion date. Because what gets really complicated is the integration at the end of all of the track systems, power, and ensuring that the civil infrastructure that's been built along the way accommodates all of that. Having it separated into these separate contracts means that we can target a market for the tunnel, which is really, really specific and really, really focused and good on building tunnels. We get confidence that the tunnel is going to be built on schedule, on budget during the procurement process of that tunnel. We then have a stations, rails, and systems contractor that comes on board, which is specifically focused on the stations, rails, and systems, and doesn't have, the Finch Early Works to worry about, doesn't have the advanced tunnel contract to worry about, and brings on the necessary folks within their team to just focus on the stations, rails, and systems. So that's a strategy that we have learned from our past projects, and part of what we're bringing here. The other approach that we're taking is, you may have heard the term public-private partnership or P3 projects. Again, one of the lessons that we learned is not all types of construction project are the same, and the one size P3 model may not fit all of the different types of contracts. And so what we are using on the stations, rails, and systems contract is a much more collaborative approach with our contractor that we bring on board to build out the design collaboratively, as opposed to a client contractor relationship. We build it out collaboratively. And as we build it out, we're also identifying the risks collaboratively. So the risk allocation, including things like schedule risk, are well understood. They're assigned to the partner who is best able to manage them when they're identified, as opposed to before they're even identified during a procurement process. And that's another strategy that we're using to maximize the probability of finishing on time.
My last question is, given that the work will generate considerable noise and dirt pollution affecting the nearby communities, okay, and we are all expected to receive tons of complaints and emails during the work, okay, is there any specific measure to minimize the impact on the local communities and businesses?
So I'm going to answer that question in two ways. The first is say that we are building a big construction project. So I won't say that there won't be impacts. There will be impacts. The key is how we communicate and prepare communities for what's to come. And so they have confidence as to when the work is going to take place and when those impacts will be realized. And the second piece is we need to work not only with our project companies and our own experts, but also with yourselves, with your staff, and with your communities about the appropriate mitigation measures. Things like sort of dust and noise are going to be products of the construction work, but Metrolinx in our recent projects has implemented all sorts of mitigation measures, including sort of temporary sound barriers for construction activities, so that we are mitigating the impacts of sound from the construction site. So those are that's just an example of a mitigation that we put in. As Raj mentioned in his slides, Metrolinx is pursuing an approach to be a good neighbor. We're going to be building in your communities. This is not our community, it's your community. And we want to be a good neighbor, not only with yourselves, but with the residents and businesses. And so that's where things like community liaison committees and the engagement that we have with residents comes in.
Okay, that's all about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Silvitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Stephen, for this great presentation, and to all your colleagues, Chris, Renee Afumboateng, and of course, Raj Ketapal, who I know very well. And it's wonderful to always see you, my friend. And I know that with Raj involved with the community outreach part of this, I know that our communities are going to be very, very well served. Raj and I worked together many years ago on the DDO project and saving the DDO lands. So he's a very good friend to this community. Just a couple of questions to you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, Stephen.
Okay.
But the Premier has said that the Ontario line gets priority. So how do you balance the building of the Ontario line, the construction of the Ontario line, construction of the Yonge North subway extension, and continuing the Eglinton Crosstown problems?
So there's a long answer to that question, so bear with me. Metrolinx is on I'll call it an ambitious and a historic level of investment in capital expansion. The provincial government and the people of Ontario have been hugely supportive to expand the transit systems. We have our Go Expansion program taking place. We have LRTs being built across the GTA, and we have the subway program that is also well under construction. We are very, very deliberate in our timing for our procurements because, as I mentioned in my slides, we don't want to meet our schedule requirement, but not actually understand how the markets that we deal with and the supply chains that we deal with are going to be responding. And so it doesn't do us any good to say we want to get out there early with a procurement if nobody's going to respond to it because they're occupied with other pursuits that they're going. And so we've been very deliberate in our staging of our procurements at Metrolinx across all of the programs, including the 4 subway projects. Case in point, the timing for the Yonge North subway extension RFQ release was timed to occur just after the Ontario line procurements for what we refer to as the northern contract. So there's a northern stations contract and a northern sort of elevated guideway contract on the Ontario line. The procurements for those had reached a point where sort of they got to a point where the market was sort of understanding who would be engaged and involved in that. And that's when the Young project started. So we're timing our procurements to sort of engage the market at the right times when the market's available. And the reason I'm saying that is because if we don't have our supply chain helping us deliver these projects, we're not going to be able to deliver them. The other sort of schedule confidence that we're bringing in, sort of the integration with the other projects, is the sort of internal sort of resources and staff that Metrolinx requires to do this. We've got a huge team that's been put in place for the subway program, and each subway project has its own designated team. And so we're not sort of trading resources to advance these projects. And so from an internal and external resource standpoint, we're managing that really, really well to make sure that we're not going to end up in a constraint point with the Ontario line or any of the other projects that are taking place. And sort of, as you mentioned, the Eglinton Crosstown. So that is one of the projects that we are learning lots of lessons from. And I've already talked about sort of how we're looking at our sort of disaggregating our big project into its component pieces. So that's one of the lessons learned from Eglinton that we're bringing to Yonge and the other subway projects for that matter as well. Also, I mentioned sort of the collaborative contracting approach that we're taking. That is a much different approach than when used on sort of Eglinton and other projects. And that is sort of sharing the risks different, identifying the risks differently and sharing the risks differently. And so those are part of our strategies to learn from past projects to have confidence that we're going to be able to deliver on the timelines that we commit to.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I know it's a very compounded question, but that's something we're always asked.
Yeah.
I know certainly I am. But what about the Ontario line? How is that going to impact the YNSC? So thank you. I really appreciate that. My next question through you, Mr. Chair, is with regards to universal Wi-Fi. So I know that this has been discussed a lot with the TTC, and they do say that they're going to be installing universal Wi-Fi along the existing lines. Can you update us on that at all? And will YNSC be, pre-wired for that? And is it something on your radar?
So most definitely it is on our radar. So two things. The first is I can't comment on the TTC's approach and timelines for providing fully accessible cellular and Wi-Fi service on their tunnels. But what I can tell you is from Finch Northerly, it is a provincial project. They are going to be provincial assets, and the province is setting the requirements. One of my jobs as the sponsor of the project is to set the requirements for our team to go and deliver. And across all of the subway projects, one of the core requirements is full cellular service and Wi-Fi accessibility on the extensions. What happens when that subway train gets to Finch is still to be determined. But we at Metrolinx, for the Metrolinx projects, including Yonge North, are saying that a requirement is to have cellular and Wi-Fi service in the tunnels.
Thank you, Stephen. That's good to know. And my last question to you, Mr. Mayor, is I know we've discussed before when you have presented to us about how the manner in which the trains are going to run in the tunnels, the vibration is going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Tempered down. What about vibration through the tunneling of the YNSE line underneath people's homes and businesses? Do you expect there to be a lot of vibration and noise as opposed to with the actual train traveling underneath a constructed tunnel?
During the construction phase?
During construction, yeah.
So the quick answer is no. It will be higher levels of noise, the vibration and what happens is in the tunnel, the tunnel shakes the ground beside it. The vibration in the ground sort of goes up to buildings. And then once it reaches the building, it doesn't create a level of vibration that people can feel, but what it does is it creates an audible low rumble. And that's sort of the noise that comes. So when we speak about noise and vibration, it really is the low rumble that people might hear within their home. And so during construction, there are two sort of sources of vibration. The first is as the tunnel boring machine is going through. And that sort of, if you think about the boring machine below ground, is grinding the soil and sort of pulling it back. Our tunnel boring machines move at about 10 meters per day. So, you know, if the average residential property sort of in this sort of established area of our communities is sort of 40 feet, then the tunnel boring machine would get underneath each residential property within the space of 2 or 3 days. The front of the machine and then sort of the tailing part of the machine. The second, and so, yes, there will be sort of vibrations created in sort of that low rumble within houses. The second source of sort of that low rumble is as the tunnel boring machine is advancing, there is a need to remove material from the front face back up to the launch shaft area and then bring in sort of tunnel liners and other sort of materials for the building of the tunnel. That work, again, we're a learning organization, and one of the lessons we learned from past projects is that when the contractor is using little work cars, which are little small trains to bring materials out and bring materials in, that does create a lot of vibration. And so what we are prescribing is that they're not allowed to do that, that instead they have to use what we refer to as rubber tire vehicles. And so that radically reduces the vibration that's created from those work cars going back and forth. And what we have further prescribed is the level of noise and vibration that our contractors will need to work to during the construction phase. Sort of I'm pleased to report that we've set a requirement that's below sort of normally accepted standards for construction phases in the project.
Thank you. The reason I ask this is because being from Johannesburg, we used to always have earth tremors from the digging in the gold mines. But that's decades and decades ago. And I don't think any rubber wheels were even thought of then. But we would experience through the day multiple earth tremors. You became so used to it that you didn't even notice it unless you had a visitor from out of town, you know, what the hell is that? So I know that there can be that kind of vibration and that tremor that, you know, hopefully we'll be able to tamp it down and it won't be so very noticeable by the communities. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And lastly, I'll gladly move to receive the presentation with thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson. Oh, actually, I guess we need a seconder for that too. Councillor Thompson, do you want to second that? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what my confusion was. Councillor Davidson, do you want to second that? The receipt? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the presentation. And we're always proud of our staff. It was good to hear the kudos because I know they do their best. Can you tell me what the cost is for this project and how much of it is coming from York Region taxpayers? Is that possible?
I can. So the announced construction cost estimate was $5.6 billion, and that was back in 2019. We are currently updating our estimates specifically for the advanced tunnel contract because we need to have that updated estimate before we go to our request for proposal process. But I can tell you that, you know, the construction projects that we're doing are not immune to all of the inflation and escalation pressures that are out there. And so what it is sort of anticipated that there will be an uplift in the construction cost estimate of the project. The cost sharing model that's been proposed for Young North is a 3 levels of government contribution, being the provincial level, the federal level, and the regional level. The sort of public preliminary agreement that was entered into between the province and York Region identified sort of the cost sort of split, where York Region is paying a portion of the municipal share of the project. And that has been identified as approximately 27.5% of the project, where the portion that York Region is responsible for is the prorated portion within York. And notionally, that represents about 20%. And that's been sort of evaluated against the $5.6 billion estimate.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, have we secured the federal and provincial portions of this project? I mean, do you have it? It's for sure, the money's coming, we've got an agreement, it's all good?
So the provincial government has sort of committed to advancing and sort of funding the project. So we have the funds necessary to proceed with our advanced tunnel contract. Sort of Metrolinx supports the Ministry of Transportation in pursuit of the funding from the other levels of government. And we understand that they are continuing to pursue the federal sort of final commitment. And I say final commitment because the federal government has already announced their pledge to fund their portion of the Yonge North subway extension. But there are some steps that the federal government needs to take to ensure that that money is available. And we're supporting our colleagues at MTO to do that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to confirm, so the actual funds coming from the federal government and the provincial government, they're 80%, I guess, because York Region's paying 20. Their 80% is not 100% in the bag assured. There's still negotiation going on, or we're still waiting for 100% confirmation that money's coming.
I would have to defer like that specificity to get back to this council with some information from MTO, because we're not part of their engagements with the federal government. We're supporting them in those engagements, but we're not part of those.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, would this project be started in would actual shovels in the ground happen before you secured those funds, or is that a deal breaker?
It's a good question, and I'm going to have to take that one back and come back to this council with the specific answer to that question, because that is getting into sort of the Ministry of Transportation's dealings with the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Forgive me, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I'm straying. The other question I have, and it's just a general, I actually grew up at Highway 7 in Yonge, and this subway's been talked about since the 70s. Which makes me ask, is it in the culture of Metrolinx and all its partners to ask if in 2023, a subway that is expected to take folks from Richmond Hill and surrounding areas to downtown Toronto and to jobs, is that still the 6-year-old model still relevant when we see such a huge shift in how people are working and people want 15-minute communities? Are those questions asked if this mega project is still relevant 60 years from now as it has been in the last 60? And I'm also thinking of affordability. You know, affordable housing used to be the suburbs. That's not really the case anymore. So traveling and commuting to your job adds an extra expense. You get my meaning. I'm just asking the big picture. Are those things you folks discuss and figure out that this is still the way to go?
Absolutely. So our initial business case completed back in 2021 identified that it was the way to go. It's a very strong transit business case. Through the work that we're doing on our preliminary design business case, so we have an incremental business case approach that we take. We will be updating all of the inputs into that, including the sort of effects on sort of work and commuting habits as a result of COVID. So we will be updating our business case as we go through the project life cycle. A couple of sort of points I want to make though about travel. We are not seeing the Yonge North project as being, you know, everybody wants to jump on the subway and go into the downtown core to work service. We're seeing it in the fullness of time. And when we have to think about the fullness of time, we're talking sort of our horizon period is sort of 60 years out after opening day. And this infrastructure is going to last for more than 100 years. So when we think about that in a time frame, what we are doing by sort of creating Bridge Station at the convergence point of all of those rapid transit services is giving people great access to the transit services that can not only take them north-south along the Yonge corridor, but also east-west along the Highway 7 corridor. And, you know, within the lifetime of the subway project, we have every belief that the 407 Transitway will be in service. And so the Yonge North Subway extension is but one component of that integrated transit network that provide not only the ability for people to jump on the subway and go a couple of stops, but also accommodate their interregional travel needs by sort of taking the subway up to a BRT service, up to a 407 Transitway service. So it's about thinking about what's the future reality look like in terms of how people are going to be moving around.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you. And I look forward to updates along the way, including those financial updates. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands at this time. Stephen, thank you very much again. I really think this is an exciting project. And as I said, the details that are being taken care of by all of us as a team and spearheaded by Metrolinx is quite significant. I think, one of the next exciting opportunities that we're going to have is to talk about some of the details like designing stations and where they're going to be and how they're going to be accessed. And that actually is incredibly important as well. And it really, it brings into clearer focus some of the plans that we've been working on and continue to work on for bridge and high-tech areas, because the design of those stations will have a lot to do with how we maximize the benefit of the transit system. I will say that I have a couple of golden shovels in my office that I've had from sod turnings and groundbreaking. So if you'd like any help at any time, just let me know. I'll have to wear my old clothes that day, but I'm pretty sure that council will be happy to do some digging if you need the help. We're here to help you.
Thanks for the offer.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to receive the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? And by the way, council, that doesn't include the offer to help, but just to receive the presentation. So, okay, so it's not official, Stephen. All right. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We had Councillor Hsu pulled 15.2.1, which is the official plan zoning bylaw amendment application for Gates of Bayview at 0 Oneida Crescent. So over to you, Councillor Hsu.
Thanks, Chair. Regarding the Gates of Bayview development, I have some comments. As we all know, this subject land is situated within the Richmond Hill Secondary Plan area, so which is designated as a high density, a mixed use residential and commercial zone located just north of the high-tech subway terminal in the future. Consequently, it's crucial to establish a comprehensive and well-planned transportation system in the surrounding area of the subject land. And it's also essential to encourage the resident living along and living in and around the Oneida Crescent to utilize public transportation. We all know that. And I will work closely with the city and the applicant to facilitate easy accessibility for a neighboring community, such as building a pedestrian pathway to the subway station, such as building a bridge across the Red Maple Road. And now I'm asking for some more, if it's possible to do that, like developing a new form of transportation like shuttle buses to bring nearby residents to the transportation hub, and also like putting at least one bus stops along Oneida Crescents. Let's see, and we can work on this. Because we all agree that we have to create a walkable community that aligns with the long-term official plan determined by the council's decision. I agree with that, and I have no doubt on this, but we need some more to make easy accessible for the residents to the other part of the city. However, I would like to still raise a concern on behalf of the existing residents living along the Oneida Crescents. In particular, those living in 85, 95, and 105 Oneida. Now, they must travel along a narrow one-lane Oneida and navigate through a narrow private dead-end road to reach the buildings. There's a dead-end road. So every day they are so frustrated to get out to the Red Maple Road because it's a long lineup, long lineup along the private dead-end road and also the Oneida to get out to the Red Maple Road. And with the addition of coming 4 new high-rises, it's evident that the situation will worsen. So, as a responsible ward councillor, it's my job to address the traffic issue there and to provide options for nearby residents. And in case where public transportation does not serve the destinations, we must take action to ensure there's safe access to Red Maple Road. That's my concern on behalf of the people living just right upstairs, 85, 95, and 105. So here is my questions, maybe to both city planner and the applicant. If there are any plans in place to widen the Oneida Crescents, to make sure that they're easy to get through the Oneida to the Red Maple Road. That's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Anthony Arulo is here and looks like he can answer that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, Oneida Road is a two-way, 2-lane road that allows for access in and out of Oneida from 2 access points. So the 1-lane condition is specific to one of the private condos themselves. And I was speaking to the applicant this morning actually about that specific condition. It continues to be under construction. They've heard the concerns from the residents and they're working to address those concerns as part of the final build out of that interior sort of circle as it relates to that specific condo. The existing condition at Oneida is a 2-lane in and out, both way in and out road that allows for 2 access points.
Yep.
The transportation analysis that was done in support of this application did identify some improvements. Those improvements have been actually fast-tracked or front-ended as part of this development. So the signalization of Oneida and Red Maple was advanced. And a left turn lane was integrated into the design of Oneida to deal with queuing. So those issues have been addressed as part of this design. All of that being said, I know the applicant is committed to continuing to work with the community to understand issues and complaints and address them either through the site plan process as potentially part of a construction management plan, because we recognize that with the construction of this development, there will be some temporary impacts as well that need to be understood and mitigated. And I know that the applicant is committed to that. And if there's existing conditions that need to be considered, I know they'd be prepared to do that as well.
Okay. My second question is there any consideration given to expand the private dead-end road just right downstairs with the 85, 95, and 105 Oneida, because it's a dead-end road, and I've got tons of complaints there because they are just very frustrated to getting out because it's very narrow and there's only one way. Can you just expand that road to let them to get out to the Red Maple smoothly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that particular improvement is actually not part of this application. It's part of an earlier phase. But I did have a conversation with the property owner because I knew that was an issue that you had raised previously. And I think there is a roundabout, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a roundabout as part of that development that's contemplated. It's currently not in commission because of the construction staging and final completion of that phase. But over time, that condition will improve to a roundabout condition where residents will find it much easier to get in and out of that development. It's just the current dead end condition is being created by the construction of that final road.
Is it possible to make a way northbound to Bantry, just behind the building, just behind the 105 and 95 buildings, and at the backyard, just make a road northbound to Bantry?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't actually evaluated that, but from what I understand, based on the site, there's some significant elevation challenges and there's some existing buildings that would be substantially complete that may make that a challenge. But I can't speak directly to the feasibility of that because I don't think we've evaluated it and determined whether it's appropriate or feasible.
The reason I'm asking because is very related to the subject land development. Because there will be a sharp increase in population size around the area. So they're very concerned about there will be too crowded and too compact there in the future. So, and that's all about my comment and also my questions. And I look forward to working with the applicant and also the city planner in the future to make there a smooth road traffic there. This is my job to do that. So I'm look forward to working. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, are you prepared to move the staff recommendations then, or?
I'm going to move forward.
Okay, all right. So I'm looking for a seconder for that. Councillor Silovitz, do you want to say anything, Councillor Silovitz?
No, I think everything's been said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we had a robust discussion about this at Committee of the Whole. Is there anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll just quickly say I really am enthusiastic to see the level of affordable housing, affordable units in this project. And I am very enthusiastic about that. I think that's a key element for us as a municipality to see those types of things happening. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in particular that part of the application. So, okay, so we have a motion on the floor then, which is the staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, the last item before we go to our in-camera session is 15.2.6, which is a sign bylaw amendment and that was pulled by Councillor Thompson. So, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor, my focus is actually just on the one portion of this, and that is the election signs and the subsequent bylaw 63-23. In looking at the 6.6.6 of the election signs on private property, one of the concerns that I have is in regards to the maximum sign area. It's limited to 0.36 square meters and a maximum height of 1 meter, whereas the current bylaw has it listed as 1.20 meters, square meters with a maximum height of 2 meters. I'd like to see this retained, and I'd like to explain a little bit why I'd like to see those numbers instead. When we're talking about private property here, I get it if we're talking about just residential properties, limiting it to a size that's equivalent to a bag sign. But private property could also include the various businesses that, when I look at my own ward, we have private properties that are not on regional roads. They're on Newkirk, they're on Enford, they're on industrial. These are, again, private property, but they also have multiple premises on them and perhaps units. And that's also going to lead me to clause E on 6.6.6 that I have concerns with as well. So a lot of those businesses could use a larger sign. And as much as, we say, okay, we'd rather see the residential properties maybe capped with the smaller size, then we would certainly have to spell that out if that's the direction that we want to go. But I certainly have had individuals when I was campaigning saying they'd like a big sign on their property. And I know other councillors have been approached in that respect as well. So that would be clause B of 6.6.6. I would rather that to say 1.2 meters, square meters, and the maximum height of 2 meters. And clause E, it's currently saying that you shall not erect, display an election sign on private property that exceeds 1 election sign per candidate. The the definition of private property simply means private property owned by or under the control of a property owner. So we have another definition that talks about premises, which says any building, multiple buildings or units within a building located on a property. So I would prefer that we put in here to say, if we're going to talk about not being displayed an election sign on private property, I would say on a premises of a private property to exceed one election sign, so that in that way, if you have multiple units on a sign, instead of being limited to one sign for the entire private property. So I'd be looking to amend this motion to rectify clauses B and E in that request, unless staff can tell me that those concerns are being covered in a different manner.
Okay. I'm not sure, Mr. Clerk.
So thank you. So just through the chair, and you know, Ms. Steele or Ms. Anand can address the specific things. I would just comment that we wouldn't normally be rewriting draft bylaws on the floor. That is very, very problematic potentially, because it can create significant inconsistency. So my advice procedurally, subject to the comments of Ms. Anand or Ms. Steele, would be that you would refer these matters back to staff to consider those so we can bring them back.
Okay. Can we have Ms. Anand or Commissioner Steele to just comment on, I mean, is there any comment on this issue that we've outlined?
So I'll make one comment first, and then I'll refer it to Dolly to talk to the specifics of the amendment. I would just like you to clarify if you're extracting the, because we deliberately did them as two different amendments, the highway signs and the election signs one. So you can still proceed with the highway sign one and just refer the election sign one back. And I will let Dolly respond to how we got to the size area that's in there and the premises versus public property.
Okay, just before we get to that then, so are you saying we could, if it comes down to this, we could take the election part of this bylaw and refer it back to staff and let the other move along? Okay. Ms. Anand?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of how we came about this, I think what we heard from our survey of our residents across the city was that they didn't want to have too many of the larger signs around there, because they expressed concern about clutter and visibility, and really wanted to restrict the placement of these signs. So that is why we were considering the smaller signs. And this is also consistent with what other municipalities are doing on private property, just to maintain, you know, sort of the integrity of the neighborhoods as we go through it. We're happy to take this back if that's what we're directed to do, to relook at the size requirement. It was, we could possibly divide it into two in commercial properties versus residential properties, but we can also look at adding into 6.6E as you've said for the premise. That's absolutely something that can be incorporated.
Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Through the chair, yes, that would be my preference, that you do come back and take a look at that for the reasons that I've outlined. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to make that motion now then, or that amendment?
I might need a hand with that through the clerk, but yes, I would like to make a motion to refer 63-23 back to staff for further consideration.
Okay, well, so yeah, and based on the comments that you made, and this is, and 63-3 or whatever you just said is the part that's the election sign. portion only, right? And
that is
pass the
correct.
rest of it.
Correct.
Councillor Silovitz, we'll wait for that to come up. But in the meantime, did you want to, were you prepared to second that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I will definitely second that. And I appreciate Commissioner Steele saying that we can definitely relook at that. I think that Councillor Thompson's discussion is very valid. The other thing I would like to add also is that when you're going through this and you're looking at it, is if there is a corner lot, a residential corner lot, so in other words, there's going to be two fronts, one on Harding and one on Church Street South. I think that those lots should perhaps have a partial exemption, that it's up to the landowner, the resident, whether or not they would permit two small signs or large arterial signs on their property, because I think that that should be, while I accept the fact that it's a bylaw, but I think the resident also needs to make that decision as well, and perhaps that can be put in as part of the discussion. And I definitely agree with the possibility of looking at arterial signs on private property. So you can either have one arterial sign or a smaller sign. You can't have both, because as Councillor Thompson said, there's many times that residents or business owners have asked me to erect a large arterial sign on their property. So if that could be considered as well, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I'll gladly second it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Can I ask, are we going to discuss the merits of what Councillor Scott Thompson said today, or are we just going to agree to put it back to staff and discuss it again at another time?
No, we can talk about if this is a referral, so we can, what are the restrictions on referrals? Mr. Clerk, it's not time and date. It's, you can talk about the substance, right?
To the chair, especially because this is referring a subject matter back based on comments, so you can certainly discuss the merits of the raise. So council staff, if this passes, could take those into consideration.
Right. So now is the time. If you got comments, then let us know.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I do think I agree that some folks who are really behind a candidate want a bigger sign, and that should be a possibility. But I also accept that we all agree we don't want the neighborhood plastered with signs, and that's the point of this. So some guidance on how, very strictly larger signs might be used. I would appreciate that guidance from staff. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I'm happy with the bylaw the way it is, but because I think the idea behind this is to reduce the amount of signs that we have, and I think that's important for a number of reasons. One is the clutter, but number two, it's also the more smaller signs and less bigger signs we have, and the less signs you have overall, is a significant cost savings for any candidate that's either existing, but especially a new candidate. It's a barrier to get into the race. So I'm okay with being as restrictive as this bylaw is being. That's probably not necessarily always in our best interest as incumbents, but I think it's a small thing that I think we can offer to new candidates. But I mean, if this was only for commercial area, if it's a corner lot and there's two frontages, I mean, I suppose we could probably work that out if that's what council wishes, and also the maximum size of the sign and the maximum number of signs. Anyway, I think I do appreciate the fact, though, that we're not doing this on the fly, because I think, changing a bylaw at the 11th hour like this opens up a can of worms and sometimes has consequences that we don't expect. So it'll give staff the time to do that. But I think this is a tweak. So I would hope that it won't take up too much more of staff's time. And if this is council's will to have this go back, that's fine. I'm happy to go along to get a little bit more information on this. So. Okay, so we have the motion is in front of us. So just to be clear, this is is just for the election sign part of it. The rest of it will go ahead, right? Yeah. So how does that affect 18.6 then, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you to the chair. If this motion passes as is, you'll note in clause C, it specifically mentions agenda item 18.6 being referred back to staff. So assuming it passes, when we get to the bylaws after this, we would publicly note that it's the only bylaws under consideration are everything but 18.6.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so we have a motion in front of us. Any more comments? Okay, I don't see Regional Local Councillor Chan on the screen. Okay, all right. So no more comments? Okay, everybody, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've completed the open session part, I believe, of our agenda. So we do have an in-camera section, which we will move to go in camera. Pardon me, you want bylaws first? Okay. So we have bylaws. We need a motion to go with bylaw 18.1, 18.2, 18.3, 18.4, 18.5, 18.7, and then 18.6 with the provision that not all of it will go forward. Right?
None of the 18.6. 18.6 is pulled entirely because that was very specific to the election piece. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Councillor Silovitz moved by, seconded. Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we're moving on then. We've got an in-camera portion of the meeting that we're going to now, so I need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Liu, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Just for the benefit of the public, if I could read the reasons we're going to closed session, please. Thank you. So council has moved to go into closed session, A, to consider matters related to the receiving advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and related to litigation affecting the municipality before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, court file number, and I won't read that out. It's the Corporation of the City of Richmond Hill at the suit of Mary Ann Dempster. And this is pursuant to section 239(2)(e) and F of the Municipal Act. And B, the motion is going to close session to consider matters relating to labor relations or employee negotiations with respect to the 2023 Richmond Hill Professional Firefighters Association Local 1957 negotiations. And this is pursuant to section 239(2)(d) of the Municipal Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we voted on that, right? Okay, so that'll be it for open session.